morning, everyone. A very warm welcome to everyone on behalf of Team CSP. Good morning to you, Shankar sir. So, we'll be starting today's session. So, I'll just directly hand it over to Shankar sir for the session. Sir?
Thank you, Niharika. Uh, can you share slide number 11?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Good morning to all of you. I realized that I had actually missed 2 slides yesterday. We had not completely covered Bhatta Tauta's criticism of Shankuka, because as you remember, there were 4 points which Bhatta Tauta had raised against Shankuka's thesis. The first one was is imitation owned by the experience of the spectator, which we discussed in detail yesterday. But I somehow forgot the remaining 3 points. So we shall quickly glance through those points also. So is imitation based on the experience of actors, and is imitation a fact? Is it borne by everyday fact? And finally, does Bharata believe that there is imitation? So these 3 points we shall first cover before we go to Bhattanayaka. So coming to whether there is imitation based on the experience of actors. So let me go to the original. Nachapi natasya itham pratipattihi ramam tat chittavrittim va anukaromi iti. So the actor doesn't think he is imitating Rama or his mental states. Ramam tat chittavrittim. Either Rama or tat chittavrittim. Rama's chittavritti, that is the mental states. So why? Because sadrishakaranam hi tavat anukaranam anupalabdha prakritina na shakyam kartum. So anukarana, that is imitation of something which the actor has never seen, is impossible. The actor has no first-hand knowledge either of Rama or of his mental states. So how is imitation possible? That is the first argument. The second is atha paschatkaranam anukaranam talloke api anukaranatmata ati prasakta. So if by anukarana you mean doing something after somebody else has done it, so that is in a temporal sense. Somebody has done something in the past and you do something after that is done. So that is also not possible. You cannot call anukarana in the rasa context as, you cannot define it as like this, because this is doing something after something somebody else has done is not limited to drama, and it spills over to the real world. In real world also we do something which somebody else has done in the past. So you cannot say that this is very specific to, this anukarana is specific to drama. So that logic also fails. Next, athacha niyatasya kasyachit anukarah api anukarah apitu atha na niyatasya kasyachit anukarah apitu uttama prakritehe shlokam anukaromi. So if the pratipaksha, that is if the person who is supporting Shankuka says, no, I am not imitating a particular person such as Rama, but a prototypical superior character such as Rama, and his sorrow is what I am imitating. I am imitating a prototypical superior character's sorrow. So then we ask, we means Bhatta Tauta and his party, his group asks, how are you imitating? Means what is the means by which you are imitating? So tarhi kena iti chintyam. Kena means by what? By how are you imitating? So if the person from Shankuka's group says, if you say with my own sorrow, then we say that is not possible, because there is, with my means with the actor's own sorrow. So that is not possible because the actor doesn't have really doesn't have any sorrow. And again, anyway, as we have discussed earlier, a mental state cannot be imitated by insentient physical movements. mental state being very sentient cannot be imitated by something which is insentient, such as a headgear or physical movements. So, na tavat chokena tasya tad abhavat. You cannot say it is through shoka because tad abhavat, because of its absence in the actor. Nacha ashrupata dina shokasya anukaraha. You cannot also imitate shoka, sorrow, with ashrupata, that is with tears, because of the said reason. That is, what is insentient cannot imitate what is sentient. So then if you say, I am imitating the responses of sorrow of a superior character, I'm not imitating a superior character, but I am not imitating the superior character sorrow, but I am just imitating the superior character sorrow's responses, the responses that stem from Rama's sorrow. So then we ask, which particular character? So that is the next sentence. Iyattu syat uttama prakrutehe ye shoka anubhavaha tan anukaromi iti. Tatrapi kasya uttama prakrutehe, which uttama prakriti are you talking about? Which superior character? So, or which particular character, which particular superior character? So if he says yasya kasyachit means some x, y or z, then Bhattatauta asks, how can something which is very general be understood without becoming very particularized or without taking the help of something particular? Then if Shankuka's party says, I am imitating someone who cries like this means cries like me, like I am now crying, or I am now shedding tears. So I am imitating someone who is crying like me. Then it is very laughable, because it is like saying I am imitating myself, which is not possible. So these are the responses of Bhattatauta to Shankuka and those who support him. So finally, Bhattatauta says, just because the author, just because the actor, it's not author, sorry, just because the actor, because of his training, so shiksha vashat, because of his training, swavibhava smaranat, because of remembering the causative factors, the actor also remembers the causative factors, and because of chittavritti sadharanikarana, this is the generalization of mental states, which we will be discussing in much detail in Bhattanayaka. Anubhavan pradarshrayan, and because of exhibiting the various anubhavas, kaku prabhriti upaskarena, kaku is intonation of voice, etc. If he is behaving using all this, behaving, if the actor is behaving in a particular way on the stage because of shiksha, because of remembering the vibhavas, or because of the generalization of mental states with Rama, or because of intonation of voice, etc., that alone does not mean there is imitation. That alone does not give scope for imitation. So coming to the next point, is there an imitation? Is there imitation based on fact? Or is there imitation of a fact? So that is also not possible, because the text has anusamvedyamanasya, but the correct reading is asamvedyamanasya. The correct reading is got from other texts. So asamvedyamanasya from Kavyanushasana of Hemachandra. So asamvedyamanasya vastuvrittatva anupapattehe. Why? Because what we have never experienced, that cannot be a fact. So then the next is Bharata accepting that there is imitation? So Muni nacha Muni Vachanam evam vidham asti. Muni Vachanam means the words of Muni. Here means the words of Bharata. Bharata also does not believe that there is imitation, because nowhere does Bharata say that rasa is an imitation of sthai. Actually, there is evidence to the contrary. He brings several things which are not seen in real life at all. Like, for example, Dhruva Gita. Like, we have songs in movies which doesn't happen in real life at all. So how can you say that that's an imitation of what is happening in real life, when there is when people in loud don't actually sing songs in real life, but that happens in a movie. So actually, Bharata brings several things which are contrary evidence actually. So In one place, Bharata uses the word Anukarana, Saptadvipa Anukarana in the first chapter itself. But Abhinav Gupta says, this is not Abhinav Gupta, but Bhatta Tauta says, quoting Bhatta Tauta quoted by Abhinav Gupta, he says, here the word Anukarana can be used different, can be understood differently. Where in that first chapter where Bharata has used the word Anukarana, that word Anukarana can be described in a different way, and the description is in the form of Anukirtana, which we will not go into, but there is a different description, there is a different way of understanding the word Anukarana there. And even if it is used in the sense of imitation by Bharata, it is used in a very literal sense, as in the imitation of a lover's attire or walk. So a beloved, a lady could imitate her lover's attire or imitate her lover's walk. And Bharata uses in that sense, not in the sense of imitating the character's behavior or a mental state. Imitating character's behavior is something altogether different than imitating an attire or imitating a walk. So now let us come to two other commentators. First, Bhattanayaka. Let us understand Bhattanayaka's thesis, and then we will go to the first portion of Bhattanayaka's argument. We'll first come to the final portion. So he says, Tasmat Kavye Dosha Bhava Gunalankara Mayatva Lakshanena Natye Chaturbida Abhinaya Rupena Nibida Nija Moha Sankatata Nivaranakarina Vibhavadi Sadharani Karanatmana Abhidato Dvitiyamshena Bhavakatva Vyaparena Bhavyamano Raso Anubhava Smrityadi Vilakshanena Rajastamo Anuveda Vaichitya Balat Triti Vistara Vikasa Lakshanena Sattvodreka Prakashanandamaya Nija Samvit Vishranti Lakshanena Parabrahma Savidena Bhogena Param Bhujyate iti. This is the thesis of Bhattanayaka. So go to the next slide, Niharika. Yeah. So this is a representation of Bhattanayaka's thesis, a schematic representation. So Bhattanayaka says that there are actually three stages by which we progress when we are enjoying a spectacle on the stage or when we are reading a literary work. So these proceed from one to the other. So first you have a particular what we call as Abhida Vritti, a particular operation called as Abhida. This is followed by a second process called as Bhavakatva, and that is followed by the third process called as Bhojakatva. What happens in Abhida Vyapara? That is the Abhida process. That is the first process. So when we are immediately for the first time introduced to what is happening on the stage, we understand everything that is happening on the stage in a very literal sense. So the Vibhava, the Vebhichari Bhava, the Anubhava, the Sthai Bhava, are all limited by time and place. We say, okay, this is Rama, and this is Rama's sorrow, and Rama is sorrowful because his wife Sita has been kidnapped by Ravana, and Rama is shedding these tears. These are the tears of Rama. This is Rama's worry, and so everything we look at from a point of view of time and place. So that is in a very literal sense, but we do not stay in this literal sense for a long period of time. Immediately we are transported to something else. So that is the second Vyapara, that is the second process, which is called as the Bhavakatva process. And in this Bhavakatva process, what happens is everything becomes generalized. So there is no Rama, there is no Sita, there is no Rama's tears also, and there are only general tears. There is only a general hero or general man who has lost his wife, who is a general wife, and the tears that are shed by Rama are not Rama's tears, but these are somehow general tears which are of all time and all places. And the Vyabhichari Bhava, the worry of Rama, becomes the worry in a very general sense. So everything becomes what is called as Sadharani Krita. Sadharani Kritam is generalized. So by the process called as Bhavakatva, and Bhavakatva involves Sadharani Krana basically. So you have Sadharani Krita Vibhava, that is generalized Vibhava, then you have generalized Vyabhichari Bhava, and then you have generalized Anubhava. From particular vibhava, particular Vyabhichari bhava, and particular Anubhava, you proceed to generalized vibhava, generalized Vyabhichari bhava, and generalized Anubhava. When all these are generalized, whatever is known from these three, namely the Sthai bhava, will also become generalized. So now the Sthai bhava of Rati, that is love or sorrow that Rama has, will not be Rama's sorrow alone, but it will be a generalized sorrow. So that is a Sadharanikrita Sthai bhava. And what happens when the spectator is exposed to this generalized mental state, which he is never exposed to in real life? Something very strange happens, magical happens in the spectator's mind. What happens is the spectator's mind is made like everything in the world is made up of a combination of the three gunas. And most of you might be familiar with these three gunas. You must all have heard, many of you must have heard the three gunas, the sattva guna, the rajo guna, and the tamo guna. The sattva guna is characterized by clarity, whereas the rajo guna is characterized by activity, and tamo guna is characterized by what do you say, as jadatva, or being very insentient, without any movement, laziness, and such characters are the characters of tamo guna. They arise from tamo guna. So what happens is when the spectator is exposed to this sadharani krita sthai bhava, the generalized sthai bhava, suddenly the rajoguna and tamoguna in his mind subside, and there is an upsurge of sattva-guna. There is an increase of sattva-guna, which is called as sattvodreka. Udreka means an increase of sattva-guna, and settling down of rajoguna and tamoguna. And such a state of the mind is called as bhoga. And what happens because of this stage, because of this change, what happens is the spectator's mind is able to savor rasana by an activity called as rasana. Rasana means savoring. Through the activity of savoring, it is able to savor the rasa which is presented in front of us, front of him or her. So I said that this change occurs in the mind of the spectator when he comes face to face with this sadharanikrita sthai bhava. So how is he able to enjoy this sadharanikrita sthai bhava, which is face to face? He is able to enjoy because of a certain mirroring change in his mind. And what happens is there is a upsurge of sattva, and when there is an upsurge of sattva in his mind, with such a mind where there is an upsurge of sattva, he is able to enjoy the object in front of him, which is the rasa. And the process through which he enjoys the object in front of him, that is the rasa, is called as the rasana process, or sometimes even rasana is spoken of as bhoga itself. So, and what is the type? There are three types of bhoga. One where there is an absolute upsurge of sattva. So you can see three boxes below. So in the first, you have an absolute upsurge of sattva, and both tamoguna and rajoguna are minimal. In the second, there is no doubt an upsurge of sattva, but rajoguna is also to some extent prominent, and tamoguna is not prominent. In the third, sattva-guna, no doubt there is an upsurge, because without an upsurge of sattva-guna, rasa cannot be enjoyed at all. So in all the three, there is an upsurge of sattva-guna. But in the second, there is also slight increase in rajoguna when compared to tamoguna. In the third, there is an increase in tamoguna when compared to rajoguna. And each of this is given a name. In the first, you call it as vikasa. There is something called as a blooming of the mind. So in the first instance, there is a blooming of the mind. In the second instance, there is a melting of the mind. Dhruti is melting. And in the third, there is a spreading of the mind. So vikasa is like the flower blooming. So dhruti is like the wax melting. Vistara would be like the oil drop on water, where it spreads everywhere. So these three things happen in the mind. And how do these happen? These happen depending upon the type of the rasa. I told that these changes mirror the rasa that is there in front of you. So the changes in the mind mirror the object that is present to it. And these three vikasa happens when the rasa in front of us is hasya, adbhuta or bhayanaka. Dhriti happens when the rasa in front of us is shringara, karuna or shanta. And vistara happens when the rasa in front of us is veera, bibhatsa or raudra. This is the change that the mind undergoes when a specific object, when three different types of objects are presented to it. The first group consisting of hasya, adbhuta, bhayanaka, the second group of shringara, karuna and shanta, and third group of veera, bibhatsa and raudra. So this is basically the thesis of Bhattanayaka. Now, Bhattanayaka also has his own criticisms against others. Now, what happens is, when everything becomes generalized, where do you locate this object, this generalized object? So it's like going to a shop and asking the going to a vegetable shop and or a fruit vendor and telling him, I want an apple, but I don't want this or that apple. I want a general apple. So you will never get a general apple in the world. You can only access particular apples. You can never access general apples. So in the same way, where do you place these generalized mental states? Generalized mental states cannot be placed anywhere. So that is what is Bhattanayaka's thought, that these general mental states are not present either in you or in somebody else. So these cannot, if they were actual objects, they could be perceived. But he says that these are not actual objects. These are generalized, and generalized that objects we never see. And because we never see, it means they are not perceived. So he says these rasas are not perceived. They are not perceived either in the self or in others. And the second is, they are not produced. Tena utpadyante. In the first, they are not seen. Tesham pratitihi na pratiyante. In the second, tena utpadyante. They are not produced. Tena vyajyante. They are not manifested also. So is not perceived. So under this, we have two groups. They are not perceived either in the self or they are not perceived in others. And they are not perceived in the self as something personal. So we cannot locate these mental states in ourselves. Neither can we locate in somebody else. So they are perceived neither by direct experience, nor by memory, or not by any other valid means of knowledge, such as verbal testimony or inference. Why are they not perceived by direct experience? If they were perceived in us, then if there was something very personal about these rasas, one would feel sad on experiencing the Karuna rasa. So one would feel very sad on watching a tragic movie, and one would never want that experience to reoccur if it had been very personal. But that is not what is happening. Many people like to watch tragic movies. They crowd to theaters to watch tragic movies. If Karuna Rasa had been so personal, if it had felt personally sad, we would never be repeatedly watching these movies. So there is nothing personal about these rasas. Second is, if these rasas were personal, a character such as Sita would become a vibhava for one's own love. So a character which is on the stage, we would start loving the character as Sita, as our own lover, which again doesn't happen. And third, this sentence is somehow interpreted differently by different people. So for example, Noli interprets it in a different way. Sheldon Pollock interprets in a different way. I have my own way of interpreting it. I don't know how correct it is, but that is how I feel. The sentence is this. So he says, Devatadau sadharanikarana ayogyatvat samudra langanader asadharanyat. So Bhattanayaka says, we cannot do sadharanikarana, generalization, in case of divine characters, such as, say, for example, the goddess Parvati, or in case of extraordinary events, for example, leaping across the ocean, because these are not part of our own repertoire. We do not relate to them very personally. To a god, we do not relate to a goddess such as Parvati. We don't relate personally in the sense of love, or we don't personally associate with extraordinary events such as leaping of the ocean, which happens in Ramayana. So but on the other hand, we actually find poems where the hero is a divine. Say, for example, the Kumara Sambhavam of Kalidasa, where the heroine is actually a divine character such as Parvati. Or we have Ramayana, where leaping across the ocean is there. So how is it that Sadharanikarana is happening here? So I don't agree with what, in a way, with what Sheldon Pollock and Noli say. And I think what Bhattanayaka means is, yes, Sadharanikarana shouldn't happen in such cases, but we do find that Sadharanikarana is happening. How is it possible? This couldn't happen if rasa had been personal. That is what is his thesis. That's what I feel. So if rasa had been very personal, Sadharanikarana wouldn't have happened. The fact that Sadharanikarana happens indicates that these are not personal. So the second is, these are not, the rasa is not perceived by memory. So why? Because there is no remembrance of anything personal while we are looking at Sita. We don't remember our own, I don't remember my own wife when I'm watching Sita on the stage. There is no spectator memory of Rama as possessing a stable emotion. It doesn't happen that the spectator remembers Rama as possessing a mental state, and after remembering that, relishes that mental state as rasa. And thirdly, also here, third point is that it cannot be perceived either through it cannot be perceived through other valid means of knowledge such as verbal testimony or inference, because such perception cannot provide the experience of rasa. A mental activity, a cognitive activity like an intellectual activity like inference, how can it provide this something which is very closely experienced such as rasa? Something intellectual cannot match the experience of rasa. Next, he says that it is also not produced, and he gives the same yukti, the same arguments that are given for is not perceived. And finally, is not manifested. Manifested means there is already something, and there's already something present, and that is getting as in a potential form, and that is getting revealed when we are watching a performance on the stage. But then, if it is there is something already there and that is getting revealed, the problem is the revelation could happen in gradations. So that would lead to gradations of rasa. You cannot say that revelation happens in the same way in all the spectators. In some spectator, the revelation could be a little bit. In another person, it could be much more. But that would again lead to gradations of rasa. Just as there were gradations of rasa with respect to Lollata, here also, depending upon the extent to which the rasa is manifested, you could have gradations of that rasa. And again, the problems such as whether this rasa is located in oneself or located in somebody else, those problems will also start. So this is what is Bhattanayaka's argument. But Abhinavagupta criticizes Bhattanayaka. He says, so Bhattanayaka, as you said, says that rasa is not perceived because there is no object called as rasa. There is no objective correlate of rasa in the real world. And so how can we perceive it? What Abhinavagupta says is, Bhattanayaka uses the word bhoga. And Abhinavagupta asks, what is this bhoga that is different from perception? And he says, if you say bhoga means tasting the object in front of us, which is the rasa, then tasting is also a type of perception. So how can you say rasa is not perceived? An unperceived object's existence cannot be confirmed. There are no unperceived objects in the world. All objects that are there, when we confirm the presence of an object, we confirm it based on it being perceived. So unperceived object is never seen in the world. So rasa must either be produced or manifested. There are only these two things for everyday objects. Everyday objects are either produced or manifested. There is no third alternative. And rasa should again be either produced or manifested. If it is not produced, if it is neither produced nor manifested, then it should be something eternal. Because only an eternal thing which is existing always is not produced. It is always existing. Why should it be produced anew? It is always existing. And why should it be manifested? It's always existing. So then you should say that rasa is eternal. But then rasa is not eternal, because rasa experience exists only as long as we engage with the text, or as long as we are seeing the performance in front of us, the acting performance in front of us. As soon as we close the text, close the literary work, and as soon as we get out of the theater, we are again back to the mundane world, and there is no experience of rasa. So rasa is not eternal. And again, rasa cannot be, you cannot say that rasa is unreal, because you do not agree that to call it as unreal. So an object that is not produced or not manifested must either be eternal or unreal, and rasa is neither eternal nor unreal. So it is like, seems like Bhattanayaka couldn't locate where rasa is. So coming back to the other aestheticians, Lollata located it in the character and the actor. According to Lollata, rasa was present in the character such as Rama or in the actor who imitated Rama. According to Shankuka, the rasa was located in the actor. And according to Abhinav Gupta, the rasa is located in the spectator. But according to Bhattanayaka, it is very difficult to say where he located this object called as rasa, because for him, rasa is not an object that can be perceived. So finally, two other points which Abhinav Gupta brings. If you say the act of tasting itself is perception, then you must have as many acts of tasting as there are number of rasas. So you say that there are only three acts of tasting: Vistara, Vikasa, and Dhruti. But then for each rasa, there should be one act of tasting. So there should actually be nine ways of tasting, not just 3 ways of tasting as you take. And also, since the 3 gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas, can be combined in innumerable ways, why there are only 3 types of bhoga? There should be innumerable types of bhoga actually. So sattva, rajas, and tamas, as you know, can be combined together in innumerable ways. It is like adding one extra morsel to the khichdi that you are preparing is also one extra modification to that khichdi, and it completely changes the khichdi. So the sattva, rajas, and tamo gunas can minutely change to innumerable degrees. So there should be innumerable types of bhoga, but that is not what you agree. There are only 3 types of bhoga according to you. So these are the various objections of Abhinav Gupta against Bhattanayaka. But then Abhinav Gupta brings some revolution here. Whereas Bhattanayaka says that this object called as rasa cannot be located anywhere because it is sadharanikrita and a generalized object is not at all found in the world. Abhinav Gupta takes it in a very different sense. Because it is generalized, and see, an object such as, there is a difference between an object such as a generalized apple and a generalized mental state. A generalized apple you might not see anywhere, but a generalized mental state, because it is a generalized mental state, your mental state also is a part of that generalized mental state. So it is not that this mental state cannot be located anywhere. It is actually located everywhere. It is located in all the spectators that are watching the performance, because in that generalized mental state, your mental state is also a part. Your mental state is also that generalized mental state. Your mental state is also included in that generalized mental state. So that is Abhinav Gupta's thesis. So coming to the next slide. So I'm not reading the original, but only the notes that I have made, because I think it will be difficult for me to complete the session if I repeatedly look into the original. But I think all the essence has been captured in these slides. So coming to Abhinav Gupta, let us first go to his thesis. Thesis always comes in the end. So, but then for the ease of understanding, I always quote the thesis first and then go into the remaining portions of the argument. So that comes in the end. Ayamatra sankshepaha mukuta pratishishakarina tavan natabuddhirachyadyate gada praktana samvit samskaracha, etc. That comes in the end. To explain what Abhinav Gupta says is a sankshepa, is a summary of his theory. Let us take 3 different scenarios. The first scenario is the scenario of everyday life. The second scenario is one of the poetic text, and the third is when we are reading when there is somebody reading the poetic text. The first is everyday life. The second is there is a world of the poetic text itself, and third is when the spectator is actually reading the text. there is some difference in all the three. So in everyday life, the sthai, the mental state, is located in a real world individual, in another person, and we infer it through karana, sahakari, and karya. In poetic text, the karana gets transformed into vibhava. The sahakari gets transformed into vyabhichari bhava. And you have to go to the next slide, Niharika. Thank you. Yeah. So you have three different scenarios, as I told you: everyday life, the poetic text, and when a reader, when an audience is watching a performance, or when a reader is reading a poetic text, literary text. So in everyday life, the sthai is located in the real world individual, in another person, and in ourselves also. In another person, what we do is, when there is a sthai in another person, we infer it through karana, sahakari, and karya. These are mirrored in a poetic text by vibhava, vyabhichari bhava, and anubhava. So here the sthai is located in the character, such as Rama. When sadharanikarana happens, so Abhinavagupta, as you see, has actually borrowed several concepts and very important concept of sadharanikarana from Bhattanayaka. So for Abhinavagupta also, sadharanikarana happens. So you have, instead of the vibhava, which is very particular to Rama, you have a sadharanikrita vibhava. Instead of a vyabhichari bhava, which is particular to Rama, you have a sadharanikrita vyabhichari bhava. And instead of a anubhava, which is very particular to Rama, you have a sadharanikrita anubhava. And when these three are sadharanikrita, obviously the rati, the mental state, will also be sadharanikrita. It will also be generalized. But then Abhinavagupta's contribution is saying that this sadharanikrita rati, it is not that it is located in any one person or in others alone, in another person alone, but because it is sadharanikrita, our mental state is also partakes of this sadharanikrita rati. So there is love in our mind also. That love is existing in the form of a vasana, in the form of a memory trace. That memory trace springs up, it emerges as, and the love that emerges in our mind when we are watching something on the stage is the the rati of Rama and the rati of the audience actually matches, because both are part of that sadharanikrita rati. Both are part of that generalized love. It might be the love of Rama, it might be the love of Krishna, it might be the love that is there in the mind of our fellow spectators. It might be the love that is there in my mind. All of these love become one love. These all become sadharanikrita. So as Abhinavagupta says, sthai transcends spatio-temporal barrier, and it is not located just in oneself or in others, but is actually located in everybody who is watching the performance or who has read the particular text. There is one catch, however, here, which is a very interesting one. What happens if you bring the actor into the picture? We know here we are telling about in this slide, we are actually speaking about while reading a poetic text. And actually, I shouldn't have put it as spectator's mind. I should have put it as reader's mind. But then here we are only dealing with a poetic text and the reader. But what happens if you bring the actor into the picture? When we are reading a text, there is only one person in whom the rati is there, and that is in the text, it is only in Rama. But when we bring the actor into the picture, we are dealing with two different people of two different types, two different times, and two different places, who are equal contenders for this rati. Rati is present in Rama, rati is present in this. The actor is also the substratum of rati. But the problem is, Rama exists in some other time and place, and the actor exists in some other time and place. But both have become somehow the contenders for rati. Both have become the substratum of the same mental state. How do we solve this conundrum? So what happens if you come to the next slide. What happens if you bring the actor into the picture? So there is rati which is suggested in the actor also, and there is rati in the character also, in Rama as well as in the actor. So how does sadharanikarana work here to balance out the time and the place between two contenders for the same mental state, which is Rati. In both of them, Rati is existing in Rama as well as in actor. Unfortunately, one belongs to some other time and place, and another belongs to some other time and place. So what actually happens is, Abhinavgupta says that when it is like the audience is presented with a confusion, it is not able to decide in whom the Rati actually is. It becomes very tired because it is confronted. In real life, we do not confront this. But at the same time, when the audience confronts that there is a mental state, there is the same mental state in two different people of two different times and places, it becomes confused. The mind becomes very confused. And instead of solving the puzzle, it just settles down. And that settling down is what is called as Vishranti, and that is the experience of rasa. It doesn't try to logically work out how it is possible that the same Rati is existing in two different people at two different times and two different places. And instead of solving this puzzle, it just gives up and settles. And that settling is experienced as Rati. And so the audience is neither able to think of the actor as the actor here, because the actor has put on the makeup, nor can the audience think of the actor as Rama. Why? This is very important. So what happens is, before a play starts, the actor is actually introduced, at least in Sanskrit play, as the actor himself to the audience without any makeup. And then the actor comes on the stage with the makeup. This is very important because it is by this means that we confuse the audience. If the audience has never seen the actor earlier, how can it get confused? So to confuse the audience, we actually present the actor in front of the audience first, during the prologue, and after the prologue ends and the play starts, the same actor comes with a different makeup as Rama and is presented before the audience. In this way, the audience gets confused and it cannot think of him as Rama because it has seen him earlier as an actor. So in a way, the two time-place constraints cancel each other and they are not solved. Actually, they eliminate each other. So coming to the previous slide, can you go to the previous slide, Niharika? Yeah. So what happens is, when this Sadharanikrita Rati is there, when this Sadharanikrita Rati in our own mind, the spectator's mind is there, this mental state of Rati, this mental state of love in the audience's mind is illuminated by the audience consciousness, which in Kashmir Shaivism, which is the basis for Abhinavgupta's thesis, is of the nature of joy. And therefore, the mental state partakes the quality of joy from the consciousness which illuminates it. In day-to-day life, however, there is no Sadharanikarana. And all our mental states are limited by constraints of time, place, and person. And therefore, it is like the consciousness is always clouded by these three things: time, place, and person. When this cloud of time, place, and person is taken away because of Sadharanikarana, there is just this mental state in its purest form, without any contamination of time, place, and person. And that pure mental state is illuminated by the consciousness, which is of the nature of joy. And that is why that mental state of the spectator appears joyful. And that joyful mental state is what is rasa. It is actually the spectator's own mental state which he enjoys with the consciousness which is free of all vignas, which is free of all hurdles, which otherwise the consciousness would have in day-to-day life. So coming to the next slide, that is the 18th slide, I think so. Yeah, the 18th slide. Now, let us go into the various ones. Now, I have spoken about the theses of Abhinavgupta, but let us go into his arguments now. What Abhinavgupta says is, there is a second perception that occurs which eliminates spatio-temporal data and also data of person after listening to poetry. And how is this? he likens this to what happens when we hear a Vedic sentence. A person who has certain qualifications to do, say, for example, a particular yajna. So a person who has to do a particular yajna has to have certain qualifications. Say there is a certain person who has all these qualifications, and he hears to this particular sentence, Vedic sentence, Tam Agnau Pradat. He offered the oblation. By oblation here means the momentum. This refers to a particular sacrifice, Vedic sacrifice, where the momentum of the sacrificed animal is offered to the fire. So this is a story that is being told in, it's in the form of a story. Somebody, he offered the oblation to fire. Some person in that story offered the oblation to fire. So the person who hears to this first takes the literary meaning, that somebody, some character, some person in history offered the oblation to fire. But the literary meaning remains only for some time. After some time, all all spatio-temporal details are removed from this particular sentence, and the person who hears to it appropriates it to himself, and he tells, let me offer the oblation to the fire. So instead of saying he, offered refers to the past. So this sentence doesn't become a sentence of the past, it becomes a sentence for all times. So everybody should offer, everybody who has qualification should offer this oblation to fire. So it becomes a generalized sentence. In the same way, a second perception occurs after the first perception, and in the second perception, all spatio-temporal data are removed, and the mental state appears in its purest state, free of any baggage of time, place, or person. So he gives few examples there. He takes few examples from poetry. So let us take this one example. Griva Bhangaviramam Muhuranupatati Syandane Baddadrishtihi Paschadena Pravishta Sharapatana Bhayat Bhuyasa Purvakayam Darbhai Radhavalirai Shramavivrata Mukha Bramshivikiranavatma Pashodagra Plutatvad Viyati Bahutaram Stoka Murvyam Prayati. This is a description of a deer in Kalidasa Abhignana Shakuntala. So Dushyanta is hunting the deer, is following the deer in his chariot, and the deer is running in front of him. This particular verse is a description of the deer. It's a very naturalistic description of the deer. What is happening to the deer? The deer is obviously very fearful because the king is following it with the arrow attached to his bow. What the deer does is, it Griva Bhangavi Ramam Muhuranupatati Syandane Baddha Drishtihi. It turns its face, it repeatedly turns its face and looks at the king, because the king is following it, and the king may discharge his arrow any moment on the deer. So it is repeatedly trying to check if the king is following it. So it repeatedly turns its head, and then its form has been contracted because it is running so fast. And poet ends by saying that the deer appears to fly on the sky rather than move on the ground. On more occasions it seems that it is on the sky rather than on the ground. It is running so fast. Now, what is shown here is the emotion of deer. So the poet says, इत्यादि वाक्येभ्यो वाक्यार्थ प्रतिपत्तेर अनंतरम मानसी साक्षात्कारात्मिका अपहस्तित तत्तद्वाक्य उपात्त कालादि विभाग. There is a negation of time and place, and what happens is mrigapotakadir bhati, the deer that is there because of sadharanikarana becomes a generalized deer. It is not a deer of any particular time, it is a generalized deer, and तस्य विशेष रूपत्व अभावात् भीत इति त्रासकस्य अपारमार्थिकत्वात् भयमेव परं देशकालादि अनालिंगितम. So what is the experience is one of fear, bhayam, deshakala adi analingitam, unembraced by time and place. This fear is not embraced by time or place. So it is not of the form, I am afraid, he is afraid, the deer is afraid, my enemy is afraid, or somebody else is afraid. So bhitoham, bhitoyam, shatruhu, vayasyo, madhyasto va ityadi pratyayebhyo So these sort of pratyas, these sorts of thoughts occur only in day-to-day life. These very personal thoughts, I am afraid, somebody else is afraid, etc., occur only in day-to-day life. But the fear that we see, fear that is communicated through art, is a fear of all times. It is not limited to one person, one time, or one place. So there are a lot of vignas in day-to-day life. There are a lot of obstacles which prevent us from having an experience of this sadharanikrita fear or sadharanikrita emotion. Those vignas, those obstacles are removed by theater. And what are those obstacles? There are 7 obstacles that Abhinav Gupta discusses. So a mental state that is perceived sans hindrances, without hindrances, and there are seven of these hindrances, that is called as rasa, and perceived by what agency? Perceived by the consciousness. So when consciousness perceives a mental state without these 7 vignas, then that experience is the experience of rasa. So when perceiving such a mental state, the self of the perceiver neither dissolves completely nor becomes very pronounced. If it had dissolved completely, if there was only consciousness at that time and nothing else, no other thing, then it would be like mystical perception. Obviously, the spectator is not having a mystical perception. At the same time, it is not pronounced also. The self of the perceiver is not pronounced too much. This pronouncement occurs in everyday life. So it is like a twilight zone where the self has not completely dissolved, nor has the self become very pronounced. And this happens both to us as well as our fellow spectators. Paropi, that is what evam paropi. It happens to everybody. And tatayeva na parimitameva sadharanyam. Therefore, this is a collective experience, because such a thing happens not only to me, but also to the fellow spectator. So how is it? It is like tatayeva na parimitameva sadharanyam. So sadharanikarana process is not limited to one person, but extends to all people who enjoy that particular performance. It is as if all of them, all the spectators have become one spectator and are enjoying that one mental state at the same time. This never happens in day-to-day life. All of us are in our own mental states. The same vasanas are not triggered at the same time in all of us. But when we are watching a performance, automatically the same, as if by magic, the same mental state springs up from the mind of everybody. The same love springs up in the mind of everybody, and all of us have become one person in enjoying the love that is presented in front of us. So this is like Vyapti Graha eva Dhumagniyo. Just like there is the Vyapti between Dhumagni. Vyapti means where A is there, B is there. Wherever there is smoke, there is fire. So just like wherever smoke is there, there fire is. This particular Vyapti is common for everybody. So it is not for only me. That it is not that I make this claim, or I make this inferential claim that wherever there is smoke, there is fire. It is common to all of us. In the same way, this sadharanya, this sadharanikarana is not the sadharanikarana of me alone. It is the sadharanikarana which happens to everybody. So na parimitam sadharanyam. Sadharanya is not parimita. It is not limited to one person. And what is where does theater figure here? Theater is actually designed to facilitate this sadharanikarana. Theater is designed such that all this generalization can happen. So everything in the stage is there to facilitate this generalization. So in aesthetic perception, there is a concurrence, as I said, of predisposition among spectators. In all of us, the same predisposition comes to surface at the same time, and we all become eka ghana. That is the word Abhinav Gupta uses. We become like one thick individual. We have all merged into one individual at the same time and are enjoying what is happening on the stage. So all of them perceive the same mental state that exists as predisposition in them, which never happens in real life. Such concurrence is not seen in real life. So the unobstructed consciousness that perceives the sadharanikarana sthai. So this consciousness through which we are experiencing rasa, that consciousness, another name for that consciousness is chamatkara. And not just that consciousness, the various effects of that consciousness that is produced in the spectators is also called as chamatkara. So the consciousness is called chamatkara. The effects of that consciousness is also called as chamatkara. What are those effects? Like effects like horripilation. Don't we horripilate when we see something, for example, very fearful? So don't we shed tears when we see something which is sorrowful on the stage? So all this is called as chamatkara. So, and another name for this chamatkara is also bhogavesha. Bhogavesha means possession by enjoyment. We are all as if we are possessed by enjoyment. We are entering into enjoyment, and it is uninterrupted. In a way, it is achinna, means uninterrupted. And one can have one. And why is it uninterrupted? Because one can never have enough of it. Pollock, in fact, takes it in a different sense. He takes that there is absence of dissatisfaction, but Noli takes that there is absence of satisfaction. I would think that there is absence of satisfaction rather than an absence of dissatisfaction, because only if there is an absence of satisfaction are we possessed. We want more and more of it. So in psychological terms, how would we describe this chamatkara? So it could be described as a type of experience. You could call it in psychological terms as a type of experience. You could call it as conviction, you could call it as imagination, or you could call it as memory. But this memory, Abhinav Gupta says, is not like the usual memory. It is a different sort of memory. It is not the memory which the logicians posit as smriti. This is a different sort of memory. Why is it a different sort of memory? And he gives a beautiful verse from Kalidasa's Shakuntala. Ramyani vikshya madhuranscha nishamya shabdane paryutsukki bhavati yat sukhitopi jantuhu tat chetasa smarati nunam abodhapurvam bhavastirani jananantara sauhridani. When we are watching something very beautiful, when we are hearing to something which is very pleasant, we become very happy. There is this happiness that is generated in us. Sukhita means we feel very happy. But at times, along with this happiness, there is also some uneasiness. And personally, for me, when I hear to certain Hindi songs, old Hindi songs, there's a lot of pleasure in hearing to those Hindi songs. But at the same time, I feel there is some uneasiness in me. And why is this uneasiness? Kalidasa says this is actually a verse by Dushyanta. Dushyanta is hearing to a song which is played by one of his wives. Being a king, he has several wives, and one of his wives in the Zanana is singing a song, and he hears to this song. He is very happy on hearing this song, but at the same time, there is some uneasiness in his mind. And why is this uneasiness? Kalidasa says, or Dushyanta through Kalidasa says, obviously the person who this uneasiness is caused because we are remembering something which we have forgotten in some previous lives. Some forgotten relationships in previous lives, that is resurfacing, and we are remembering it, but we are remembering it unconsciously. We are not consciously remembering it, but we are unconsciously remembering some past memories. And when Abhinav Gupta is saying that chamatkara could be of the form of memory, it is of this form of memory, not of usual form of memory, because usual form of memory, we are always aware of our previous experience of that object. When we remember an object, we know of our previous experience. But in this verse, the Dushyanta doesn't remember what it is. He only has a feeling of uneasiness, and he knows that it is because of some remembrance of some past relationships, but he doesn't know what it is. So this smriti, if you call it as chamatkara, this is something different than the logician's smriti. So whatever you take it to be, it is but a perception, one in which a mental state such as love appears in its purest form, unconditioned by any specifications of time, place, and personhood. Such a love is visualized or perceived by the consciousness, from which the veil of time, place, and personhood has been temporarily removed. And that is why this is also a perception. You cannot say that this is not a perception. And it is not like everyday perception. It is not laukika. If it had been everyday, if it had been like everyday perception, there was no need for us to throng movie halls. Why do we throng movie halls? Because this perception is something different. It is not everyday perception. It is not erroneous. We don't go away from the movie hall thinking that we did some error or we thought we had some erroneous thoughts. It is not indescribable like the experience of Brahman. It is not like everyday perception, because everyday perception is caused by karana, karya, and sahakari, but this is caused by vibhava, anubhava, vibichari bhava. It is not also in the form of a superimposition of something erroneous on something true. It is not like rasa is something erroneous that is superimposed on the bhavas. So it is not of all these characteristics. And then he says, you could even agree with Lollata, and you could also agree with Shankuka in a way. Lollata says that rasa is an enhanced form of the Sthayi Bhava. And Abhinavgupta says, okay, that is true. Yes, rasa is an enhanced form of Sthayi Bhava, but the enhancement is because while Bhava is restrained by time, place, and person, rasa is unrestrained by time, place, and person. Surely something which is unrestrained by time, place, and person is an enriched form of something which is restrained by time, place, and person. And again, as Shankuka tells, let us even take for granted that it is an anukara, it is an imitation, because rasa follows in the wake of bhava. If there were to be no bhavas, if there were to be no mundane mental states, you couldn't have had the aesthetic mental states. Next, he discusses the various vignas. As I told you, there are 7 vignas, 7 obstacles to the enjoyment of rasa. What are these vignas? And I think I will end with these vignas and then proceed to, if I have time, proceed to an initial portion of Vakrokti Jivita, of the Karika that I have chosen. So the vignas, first vigna is Pratipattau Ayogyata, unfitness of comprehension, which is again described by him as Sambhavana Viraha, or impossibility. And what he says, if samvedyam asambhavayamanaha samvedye samvidam viniveshayitumeva na shaknoti. You cannot place your consciousness, you cannot viniveshana means to place. You cannot place your consciousness on something which you doubt, whose possibility you doubt. If you doubt something, how can you place your consciousness on it on steady grounds? You cannot. This doubt will come in the way of placing your consciousness on that such an object. So how do you overcome? How does theatre overcome this? Theatre overcomes this particular obstacle by choosing for its subject. So when you choose a subject for your drama, as much as possible, you should choose Loka Samanya Vastu Vishaya. That is in the experience, that is a fact, something which is a fact for everyday life. You should choose a story where things are something which are a fact, which can be facts in real life also, something which everybody has experienced in real life. Suppose you have to choose, granted that you have to choose something Aloka Samanya, which is very extraordinary. You should actually choose something which is ordinary, but if you choose something extraordinary, how do you do it? You then take some story which is prakhyata, which has become famous, such as the story of Ramayana. So what he says here, akhandita prasiddhi. Akhandita means unbroken. Prasiddhi is fame. Because of this unbroken fame, there is a sort of belief of the audience on this. And because pratyaya is there. Pratyaya means there is belief which is created in the extraordinary events that are described in Ramayana, like jumping across the ocean or leaping across the ocean, just because of akhandita prasiddhi, just because there is an unbroken tradition, unbroken fame has given it a sort of believability. And because of such fame, so because you use Ramayana and Mahabharata because they have gained such fame. So you take stories, even if you have to take something extraordinary, you take from stories on which the world already rests the world has some belief. Then there will be no question when you are watching it. You will not suddenly start to question how is Hanuman leaping across the ocean, because there is a sort of believability that is achieved to it. Next, you have what is called as Swagatatva Paragatatva Niyamena Deshakala Vishesha Vesha. So here what happens is, if pleasurable and painful mental states are appropriated to oneself, if the audience, a member of the audience, appropriates the pleasurable and painful mental states of the character to himself, then there is no experience of rasa. Why? If you appropriate it to oneself, by definition rasa is not of anybody. It's not of anybody particular, by which it means it is of everybody. But if you start to appropriate those mental states to yourself, you will not enjoy rasa. Why? Because if it is pleasurable, then you will have the fear that the experience will end. Oh, I have this such a pleasurable experience. When will this end? I don't want this to end. You will start thinking like that. Or you will have the preoccupation with preserving it. Oh, let me preserve this pleasurable sensation. I don't want this to be lost. Or what will happen is you will have a desire to acquire something similar. Let me acquire something similar to this pleasurable experience in real life. If it is displeasurable, a painful mental state, if you appropriate it, then you will have the desire to free of yourself, to be free of it. Just like you are free of this, you want yourself to be free of displeasurable mental states in real life. If you appropriate the painful mental states of the character to yourself, then you will have the second thought. So in all these, you have a second thought that follows the first thought. So the second thought is, okay, now I am having this painful mental state. Let me now be free of it. If you have a pleasurable mental state, then you might have a desire to show off. If you have a displeasurable mental state, you might have a desire to hide it. So these second thoughts will come. These second thoughts shouldn't come. If these second thoughts are come, then there is no experience of rasa. On the other hand, let us take, if we regard these mental states are pertaining to somebody else, then also there will be no rasa. Because like in everyday life, if we particularize it to somebody else, we will, depending on whether we identify the other person as a friend or a foe or somebody who is neutral, we will also experience sukha, dukkha, moha, madhyastya, etc. If the person is a friend, then we will also experience friend. If you think that the actor on the stage, if we think of him as a friend who is enjoying, who is having some displeasurable mental state, then because I think him to be my friend, I also will have a displeasurable mental state. So if we regard these mental state as pertaining to others, thinking that okay, this actor himself is having this negative mental state, this actor himself is suffering, then what you will do, you will run up to the stage and start to look for means by which you can save the actor from that displeasurable mental state. You will not experience rasa. So how do you overcome this? You overcome this by concealment of the actor by costume, after introduction of the actor as he is during the prologue. So you introduce the actor as he is during the prologue, and then conceal the actor's personality by the costume. Then what you do, you use specialized or uncommon language on the stage. So, or you have very special stage designs which are unlike everyday architecture. So to actually free the audience of limitations of time, place, and person, you have all these uncommon things in the paraphernalia of theater. So spectators' consciousness cannot rest on the actor since his person is concealed because of the various apparel, because of the aharya that he has put on, because of the makeup that he has put on. His person is concealed. But on the other hand, you cannot rest completely on the assumed form also. You cannot say that this is Rama also, because you have already seen the actor who is put on the role of Rama as the actor himself. So your mind, your consciousness will not rest on the assumed form, neither will it rest on the actor. So in essence, what actually happens is there is a negation of real being, either of the actor or of the character. Next, nija sukhadi vivashi bhava. To become when we are overcome with our own sadness. So many of us may enter into the theater with our own preoccupations of real life, with our own sadness and with our own happiness. So especially when we are sad, so such a person will not be able to rest his consciousness on what is there on the stage. He will not be able to concentrate on what is on the stage, because he will be preoccupied with his own experiences, pleasurable and displeasurable experiences. So what do? You create sadharanikarana with such paraphernalia where sadharanikarana is very easy. Sadharanikarana with respect to the drama per se, with the dialogues, etc., is slightly difficult. But Sadharanikarana is much easy when it comes to Atodhya, that is instrumental music or vocal music, etc. The Vichitra Mandapapada, the beautiful and variegated way in which the theatre is adorned, Vidagdha Ganika, beautiful dancers, all these are Sakala Bhogyatva Sahishnu. It is very easy to go to a state of Sadharanikarana with these other paraphernalia than the drama proper. So you begin with all these things. You set the mood in a way for Sadharanikarana to happen. And through means where Sadharanikarana is very easy for any person. And then you have two other vignas, two other obstacles, Pratiti Upaya Vaikalya and Sputatva Bhava. Pratiti Upaya Vaikalya is an absence of the means of apprehension. How do you create apprehension, create perception in the audience if there is an absence of means at all? And if there is lack of clarity, and both these will affect the rasa experience. How do you overcome this? So, you should overcome this by showing on the stage something which approximates as close as possible the sensory perception of real life. How do you do this? Through abhinaya, the four modes of representation: the aharya, the vachika, the the sattvika, and the angika. These four types of abhinaya, four modes of representation. And to make it as close as possible to real life, you base it on lokadharmi, that is on realistic representation as they are in real life. You will also take care of styles and local usages, because if you, for example, you have the character as a farmer, and the farmer is speaking in very chaste Sanskrit, that is not approximating what is actually on real life. So you should use local usages. The way that farmer speaks, in that way the character farmer should speak. The way farmer in real life speaks, in the same way should the farmer on the stage, the actor who puts on the role of farmer on the stage, speak. So you should give importance to local usages. These will make the perception as close to real life as possible. Then you have what is called as apradhanata. So the consciousness, you should not allow it to settle on something which is very subordinate, and you should always allow it to settle, because consciousness by nature will settle only on something which is essential or predominant. If it settles on if it settles on something subordinate, it will always, because the subordinate itself is depending on the predominant, the consciousness will also run towards the predominant. It will not settle on the subordinate. So what do you mean by subordinate, and what do you mean here by predominant? By predominant means the mental states of rati, krodha, utsaha, and nirveda. As I said, there are 8, or according to Abhinavagupta, 9 mental states, 9 stable mental states, that is the sthai bhava. And 4 of these are rati, that is love, krodha, anger, utsaha, which is perseverance, and nirveda, which is like which is the sthai bhava of shantarasa. So these 4 are said to be pradhana. These 4 are said to be the most important, essential mental states, essential sthai bhavas, essential stable mental states. Why? Because they are directly linked to the 4 life goals. So it is not that we have these various stable mental states randomly. It is not that God has said you just have these mental states and do whatever you want with it. We are having these mental states because there is a direct relationship with these mental states with the 4 goals, 4 life goals of dharma, artha, kama, and moksha. So rati is linked to kama, krodha is linked to artha, utsaha is linked to dharma, and nirveda is linked to moksha. So there is a direct relationship between these 4 mental states and the 4 life goals, and that is why we are having these mental states. So these are the pradhana. And all these rasas, all the rasas that emerge from these, rati is shringara, krodha gives rise to raudra, utsaha to veera, and nirveda to shantarasa. All these rasas are of the nature of bliss, because all of these are illuminated by the consciousness which is free of various limitations. So, but he says, Abhinavagupta says, such a rasa, such a sort of bliss is possible in day-to-day life too. And especially in women, he says, uniformly dense sorrow consciousness is also a cause of rest in women. Even if sorrow is experienced very thickly in a very dense nature with lot of concentration, even on sorrow your mind can rest and you can have bliss even out of sorrow, because there is nothing that is obstructing that sorrow. And this he especially tells with respect to love making in women, when they enjoy uh, various otherwise very displeasurable uh, displeasurable actions that are done to them. In spite of that, they are enjoying, because there is, even in this sorrow consciousness has become very thick, and that thickness of sorrow consciousness itself makes it unobstructed, and there is an experience of bliss even out of this sorrow consciousness because of coloring. So even though these are in a way full of bliss, even though these rasas are full of bliss, there is still a touch of bitterness in them. There could be a touch of bitterness. For example, in Veera Rasa, there could be bitterness because Veera Rasa Utsaha is born out of the ability to ability to somehow bear difficulties. So because Utsaha is born from the ability to somehow suffer difficulties, that is why there is some bitterness even in the Veera Rasa. Now, what do you say about the various other rasas? The Hasa, the Shringara, Hasya, Karuna, Rautra, Veera, Bhayanaka. So we have 4 more rasas. So he says that these are not pradhana. The pradhana is only Rati, Krodha, Utsaha, and Nirveda, but these are not pradhana. But what they can do is they can color these pradhana. So they can add some color to Rati, Krodha, Utsaha, and Nirveda. Elsewhere, it is said that the sthai bhavas can also become like Vyabhichari bhavas. So these 4 sthai bhavas, Hasa, etc., are actually becoming the Vyabhichari bhavas of Rati, Krodha, Utsaha, and Nirveda. Why they can easily become the Vyabhichari bhavas of these sthai bhavas themselves can become Vyabhichari bhavas, because the vibhavas, the causes for Hasa, etc., are easily met within world. And there is a passage there where he says that Hasa, etc., the causes for laughter, etc., are very easily found in the world. And therefore, even if Hasa is not pradhana, it can still color the pradhana. And then he makes an important, I'm not going into the details, but the summary is what is given here. Sthai is present innately in all beings, but Vyabhichari bhavas are not present in all beings. You know that there are 33 transient mental states, and there are these 8 stable mental states. He says that the 8 stable mental states are almost like basic emotions. These are present innately in all beings, even at the moment of birth. That is what he says. Jata eva hi jantuhu amibihi iyatibihi samvidbihi parito bhavati. Jata eva, the very moment a being is born, it is overcome by all these. It has these 8 stable mental states. On the other hand, the Vyabhichari bhavas are not like that. The Vyabhichari bhavas may be present or may not be present. For example, he gives the example of Shrama, which is fatigue. Fatigue is also a mental state. The mental state called fatigue, may be present in some, may not be present in, for example, a yogi who has, this is in the next page. Sorry. Yeah. So it might not be present in a yogi who has done a lot of yogic exercises and who is consuming various rasayanas, etc. He might not experience this Shrama. So Vyabhichari bhavas are not present in everybody, but need not be present, but sthai bhavas are present in every being that is born. So, and then he gives an analogy of precious stones, and he says that the Vyabhichari bhavas are like various precious stones that are stringed on these, that are stringed on the thread of sthai bhava, or threaded on the string of sthai bhava. If the sthai bhava is like a thread, on this thread of sthai bhava, you have these various Vyabhichari bhavas shining like precious stones. And one characteristic of sthai bhava is that even in the presence of vibhavas, even in the presence of these stimulant factors, it is still present in us in the form of vasanas. The sthai bhavas never go away, never disappear completely. They're always present in us as memory traces, the 8 sthai bhavas. On the other hand, the Vyabhichari bhavas disappear as soon as the stimulant factors are taken away. The sthai bhavas, even in the absence of their stimulant factors, still exist in our mind as these vasanas, these memory traces. Finally, there is this last Vigna, which is called Samshaya Yoga. And here he says that it is not just because of Vibhava, just because of Anubhava, just because of Vyabhichari Bhava that we are able to guess a Sthai Bhava. A Sthai Bhava is not I should not use the word inferred here, because inference is a part of Shankuka's debate. Suggested is what I have to use. So a Sthai Bhava is suggested not just by Vibhava, not just by Anubhava, not just by Vyabhichari Bhava. So Vibhava, Anubhava, or Vyabhichari Bhava do not have an one-to-one relationship with Sthai Bhava. But the combination of the three, the Sanyoga, the combination of Vibhava plus Anubhava plus Vyabhichari Bhava is what has a one-to-one relationship with Sthai Bhava. That is what bears a one-to-one relationship with Sthai Bhava. And he gives an example. Maybe I'll end with that particular example. Tatra Anubhavanam, Vibhavanam, Vyabhichari Bhavanam cha Pratak Sthayini. Pratak means separately. Sthayini niyamo nasti. There is no one-to-one relationship with Sthai of these three. Why? Because Bashpadehe, tears could be bought, could arise either because of joy or because of a disease of the eye. So it is not that tears are born only of sorrow. Next, Vyagradescha Krodha Bhayadi Hetutvam. A stimulant factor such as a tiger can be equally a stimulant factor for anger if the person is very brave. On seeing the tiger, it might be actually that his anger is aroused. Or in some other person, it is bhaya that is aroused. In the same way, Shrama Chintader, Utsaha Bhayadi, Aneka Sahacharatva, Avalokanat, and various Vyabhichari Bhavas like Shrama, Chinta, etc. are seen to occur with various Sthai Bhavas. There is no one-to-one relationship of Shrama. We cannot say that Shrama has to occur only with Karuna. Shrama may also occur with love. So there is no one-to-one relationship of these Vyabhichari Bhavas also with the Sthai Bhava. But Samagri means Samagrata, the coming together of all the three is you can never mistake it. There will always be a one-to-one relationship with a particular mental state. So with this, actually I end my class today. To summarize, if Niharika can go to the next slide, not this, the next, the 22nd slide. Yeah. So Lollata, to summarize, for him, rasa is produced in the character primarily, and only secondarily by extension in the rasa exists in the actor. So it is produced when his or her Sthai Bhava is enriched by the aesthetic elements, by which I mean the Vibhava, Anubhava, and Vyabhichari Bhava. For Shankuka, the actor's imitation of the character's Sthai Bhava is what is rasa. And it is inferred by the spectator from the aesthetic elements. So the aesthetic elements are given to the spectator, and from that he infers the character's Sthai Bhava, which itself is an imitation of the actor's Sthai Bhava, which itself is an imitation of the character's Sthai Bhava. According to Bhattanayaka, the generalized Sthai Bhava, and it is not clear where it is located, it is enjoyed by the spectator's Sattva dominant mind. And finally, Abhinav Gupta, he says the generalized Sthai Bhava, because it is generalized, is also located in the spectator's own mind. And when this generalized Sthai Bhava is illuminated or manifested, just as a lamp manifests something, by the spectator's unobstructed consciousness, which is innately characterized by joy, such a generalized Sthai Bhava becomes rasa. And because it is illuminated by the consciousness whose nature is one of joy, the Sthai Bhava's experience is also one of joy. So with this, I end. But I think for 5 or 10 minutes, if there is time, I can go to the introductory portion of Vakrokti Jivita, because I don't want to club two things tomorrow completely. So yeah. So if you can, so what I am basically discussing is, you can stop here. Vakrokti Jivita by Kuntaka. Now we come from the spectator to the poetic work actually. And Kuntaka says that there is something special about the words and meanings in poetry. These are not the words and meanings that are employed in day-to-day life. This is not what we, when we employ a word, we don't, the way we set, but the word and the meaning, the way they are employed in day-to-day life are not the way they are employed by poets. there is a special nature of word and meaning in poetry, and that he discusses under the mnemonic verse Karika 1.9, and that is what I will be discussing and the explanation thereof. So let me go to 3-4 slides today if I can finish it. So coming to the next slide, the Karika itself, the verse itself is as follows. Yeah. Shabdo vivakshitarthaika vachako anyeshu satsvapi artha sahridayallada kari swaspanda sundaraha. Though there are other words that can also signify an object that is being described, this poet is describing some object. There are several words that can also signify the same object. The word, the most important word in a poem, the word that the poet selects is the one which conveys the intended meaning. The poet has an intended meaning. And where is that intended meaning? It is in the poet's mind. And he should use a word that conveys this intended meaning alone. And what is that meaning? It is the meaning which is attractive on account of its nature. And what is the nature of that meaning? It is the nature is one of creating joy in the connoisseur. So you can see how Kuntaka is bringing both the poet as well as the connoisseur in the experience of rasa. He is uniting them in this experience of rasa, and both have their places in this experience of rasa. The what places they have, I'll just come to in the next slide. So this is how I have understood Kuntaka's. This is a schematic representation. So the poet has an idea. The idea can be considered as the artha. The idea is not a mere idea. To the poet himself or herself, the idea strikes with some joy in it. So that is the vivakshita artha, the idea that he wants to convey. He wants to put in the form of words. And as a personal, from personal experience as a poet, I find, or it might be the experience of many people also, for me personally, I know that when an idea strikes an experience, often it strikes in a visual form and not in its verbal form. If it had stuck to me in verbal form, as soon as I had the idea, I should have been able to put it on paper. But that doesn't happen at all. I get the idea mostly in a visual form and then search for words which can approximate that idea. It is not that it happens suddenly. As soon as the idea I have the idea, I do not get its verbal form. In a way, as Bhartrhari says, there are 4 stages of speech: Parapashyanti, Madhyama, and Vaikari. In Madhyama, there is just the idea, and in Vaikari, you have the articulated speech. So it is not that only in very rare cases there is a complete match of Madhyama and Vaikari. As soon as I have the idea, I have the words that completely convey that idea. Often, after I get the idea, I have to search for words. So you have word 1, word 2, word 3, among which he has to choose. The poet has to choose. Then what he does, he does not select word 1 and word 2 because they do not match with his vivakshita artha. They do not match with his idea, and then chooses word 3 because it is the only word which is vivakshita artha eka vachaka. Eka means alone. That alone is the vachaka, is the denoter of the vivakshita artha, of the artha that is there in the mind of the poet. So he incorporates this word into the poem. When the reader comes face to face with this word, there is a replication, there is a mirroring of what happened in the poet earlier. Suddenly, there is the mind lights up, the mind of the reader lights up. There is idea flashing in the mind of the reader, and just as there was idea combined with joy when the poet had the idea, there is a mirroring of this, and the reader has both the idea as well as the joy that accompany it. Coming to the next slide. Here I actually have most of the original primary source I have put on the slide itself because this is a smaller presentation. So what Kuntaka says is sa shabdaha kavye yaha tat samuchita samasta samagrikaha. That is called the word in the poem, which is equipped with everything that is suited for that poem. So what sort of a word will be the one that is equipped with everything that the poem demands? it will be what sort of word is that word which that alone which conveys the intended meaning. That one word which conveys the intended meaning alone. There is an intended meaning in the poet's mind, and the word that connotes only this intended meaning is that word which the poet calls as the word. So one the poet wishes to say, Vivakshita, where the poet intends to. So next, Kuntaka says, I'll just read out from the original. सामान्यात्मना वक्तुम् अभिप्रेतो यो अर्थः तस्य विशेषाविधायी शब्दः सम्यक् वाचकतां न प्रतिपद्यते. So the poet wants to intends to convey something which is very general. There, the poet shouldn't use a word that communicates something particular. In the same way, where something particular about an object is to be intended to be communicated, there the poet should only use a word that communicates the said particularity alone. So to give an example, maybe I'll end with this particular example. Can you come to the next slide? Yeah, thanks. So kallola velita drishat parusha praharair anyanyamuni makarakara mavamansthaha kim kaustubena bhavato vihito nanama yachna prasaritakara purushottamopi. So this is a verse which is addressed to the ocean. Actually, it is addressed to a person indirectly, but the poet is addressing to a person indirectly by addressing the ocean. He's calling some person as the ocean. He's making a metaphor between a person and the ocean, but he is only referring to the metaphor, not the person to whom the metaphor belongs. So, O ocean, hey Makarakara is ocean. Do not disrespect these gems. So there are gems in the ocean. So that is why one of the synonyms for the ocean is Ratnakara. Means the Akara, the source of Ratnas, source of gems. So the poet says, do not respect these gems by striking them harshly with stones thrown around by your waves. So when waves arise, they throw stones and these stones hit on these gems. And the poet says, O ocean, do not disrespect these gems by hitting them with these stones. Why? Because didn't even Vishnu, who is best among beings, you can note the word the poet has used there. Purushottama. There are hundreds of words for Vishnu. Instead of all those words, he is actually using the word Purushottama, the best of beings. There is something important in using this word instead of all other synonyms, because he is actually addressing some person. So Purushottama not only means Vishnu, it also means the best among persons. So indirectly, he is actually addressing, for example, a king who is best among persons, who is actually disrespecting a particular, disrespecting people who are well learned or scholarly, etc. So he's saying, didn't even Vishnu, who is best among beings, extend his hand in supplication before you because of the Kaustuba gem? So you know the Kaustuba gem was born during the churning of the ocean. And even Purushottama extended his hand in supplication in front of the ocean, begging the ocean to give him the Kaustuba gem. So what the poet says is, here you have started by telling don't disrespect the gems. But then instead of you maintaining that speciality, you're maintaining that commonality. So he's not referring to one common gem, but he is referring to gems as a whole, as a group. So he's telling disrespecting these gems. Having said that, having brought something in common, you should not go to something which is particular. And you shouldn't say that, O Kaustubha, because you are telling about gems actually. So you should have, instead of saying O Kaustubha, or instead of saying Kaustubha, you should have said, because of one of those gems. Didn't Vishnu, best among beings, extend his hand in supplication because of one of those gems, not because of Kaustuba gem. Kaustuba gem surely is one of those gems, but because he has started by telling about the gems in common, he should end by telling about the gems in common. So with this verse, I will end because the next verse demands a lot of explanation. It's a verse from Kalidasa's Kumar Sambhava, and lot of explanation is needed. So I will end with this particular slide. So we can look into the next slides tomorrow, and also Bhoja's Shringar Prakasha. There I am not. It is not complete translation because partial translation and various verses that are provided by, there are almost around 60 verses. If I have to translate all those verses, I would end up translating 100 verses almost. So I am not translating all those verses. I am only translating the particular gunas. There are certain traits of various characters that are described by Bhoja. I will only be translating the words for those traits and what is the description of that trait given by Bhoja, so that we can ponder over tomorrow. So with this, I end today's presentation. Thanks a lot for being with me during this presentation. Thanks Niharika, and again thanks to Sangeeta ma'am and Saurabh Nodaria. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. So I'll just make a few announcements. So as we have exceeded our time limit for today, so the discussion will be open on WhatsApp groups. Just like yesterday, you'll get sufficient time to ask questions, and Shankar sir will be responding like during or during any classes or maybe after the workshop. And I'll reshare his email address if you want to email him personally. So all that will be available. Some few announcements are the e-certificates will be given to all the participants who attend at least 2 classes out of 3, and the feedback forms links will be emailed to you, all of you, on 20th itself. So for any other queries, you can always contact me or Ashwini. You can email us on our official email address or WhatsApp me or Ashwini, and we'll respond to you. And now I'll meet you all on the WhatsApp group that will be open just like yesterday. So please.
I also have a request to make. So I will take some time for each of these and the answers for. So you should be a little patient. So I will come to your questions when I have answered the questions of others. So please be a little patient. And if I have not been able to answer, also maybe could be because of my tiredness, my shrama itself. I will see to it that once I get out of this summer fatigue, I will surely look into your questions or the mails that you have sent and answer them. Thanks a lot.
Please bear with us. Dr. Shankar is responding to 2 WhatsApp groups. There are multiple amounts of questions that he gets. So yes, please, thank you so much for your patience and for your participation for today's session. Now we'll meet you on 20th. So there is no class tomorrow, but day after tomorrow. So the WhatsApp group will be active today itself till the evening. Sir will respond as and when he gets time, and he'll respond in the way he likes. I can't tell him how to respond. So please bear with us, with our team, and also please have some patience before Shankar sir answers your questions. So thank you so much. I'll see you day after tomorrow on 20th. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks a lot.